The old house stood on a hill overlooking the town of Oakhaven like a skeletal finger pointing at a bruised twilight sky. Locals whispered its name, Blackwood Manor, with a tremor in their voices, tales clinging to its decaying stone walls like the ivy that choked its windows. They said the house breathed secrets, that shadows danced with memories, and that the very air within its crumbling embrace held the scent of sorrow and something else. Elara, a freelance photographer with a penchant for the forgotten and the eerie, found herself drawn to Blackwood Manor like a moth to a flickering, dangerous flame. She had heard the stories, of course, the hushed accounts of unexplained noises, fleeting figures in the windows, and a chilling despair that seemed to seep from the very foundations. Most dismissed them as folklore, the product of overactive imaginations in a town steeped in its own history. But Elara saw something else in the grainy, decades-old newspaper clippings she'd unearthed, a raw, untamed energy that pulsed beneath the surface of the mundane. Armed with her vintage Rolleiflex and a healthy dose of intrepid curiosity, Elara arrived at Oakhaven on a blustery autumn evening. The wind howled through the skeletal branches of ancient oaks lining the long, winding driveway, sounding like mournful sighs. As the manor loomed into view, its darkened windows like vacant eyes staring into her soul, a prickle of unease danced on her skin. It wasn't just the dilapidated state of the house. It was a feeling, a palpable sense of being watched, of something ancient and slumbering stirring within. The heavy oak front door, warped and scarred by time, creaked open with a groan that echoed through the silent halls as Elara pushed it inward. Dust motes, disturbed by her entry, swirled in the faint light filtering through a grimy window pane, creating an ethereal, almost ghostly atmosphere. The air was thick with the smell of decay, damp wood, and something else, something metallic like old blood. Elara moved cautiously through the entrance hall, her footsteps echoing eerily on the rotting floorboards. Shadows stretched and contorted in the corners of her vision, playing tricks on her eyes. The silence was oppressive, broken only by the wind rattling the loose window panes and the frantic thumping of her own heart. She began to document the house, her camera clicking methodically, capturing the peeling wallpaper with its faded floral patterns, the cobweb-draped chandeliers that hung like skeletal remains, and the heavy, dust-laden furniture shrouded in white sheets, resembling silent, watchful figures. Each room held a story, a whisper of lives lived and lost within these walls. In the grand library, lined with shelves of decaying books whose titles were obscured by dust and time, Elara felt a sudden drop in temperature. A cold spot, distinct and unsettling, clung to the air. She held her breath, listening intently. A faint scratching sound emanated from behind one of the bookshelves. Her pulse quickened. A rat? Or something else? She slowly approached the shelf, her hand instinctively reaching for the small, antique silver crucifix her grandmother had given her. The scratching stopped. Elara hesitated, then gently pulled the heavy shelf away from the wall. Behind it, concealed in a small alcove, was a wooden box. It was plain, unadorned, but it felt strangely significant. As Elara reached for it, a whisper brushed against her ear, so faint she almost dismissed it as the wind. "Leave." Elara froze, her hand hovering over the box. The whisper had been undeniably there, a breath of icy air in the stagnant room. She spun around, her eyes scanning the shadows, but she was alone. Dismissing it as her imagination playing tricks on her, fueled by the house's eerie ambiance, she carefully lifted the box. It was surprisingly light. The lid was held shut by a tarnished silver clasp. With trembling fingers, Elara unfastened it and lifted the lid. Inside, nestled on a bed of faded velvet, was a single object, a small, intricately carved wooden doll. It was unsettlingly lifelike, with wide, staring eyes that seemed to follow her movements. A strand of dark hair, unnervingly human-like, was glued to its scalp. As Elara reached for the doll, the temperature in the room plummeted again. The scratching sound returned, louder this time, and seemed to be coming from everywhere at once. The shadows in the corners of the room deepened, swirling and coalescing into indistinct shapes. Fear, cold and sharp, pierced through Elara's curiosity. This was more than just an old, abandoned house. There was something here, something malevolent, and it didn't want her here. She quickly closed the box, her heart pounding against her ribs like a trapped bird. She had to get out. Now, as she turned to leave, a low growl echoed from the hallway outside the library door. It wasn't the growl of an animal. It was deeper, guttural, filled with an ancient rage. Elara backed away slowly, her eyes wide with terror. The shadows in the doorway seemed to writhe and stretch, taking on a more defined, monstrous form. A pair of glowing red eyes materialized in the darkness, fixated on her. She stumbled backward, knocking over a stack of decaying books. The noise seemed to enrage the entity in the doorway. It took a step forward, and a chilling gust of wind swept through the room, carrying with it the stench of decay and something else. Something acrid, like burnt bone. Elara scrambled to her feet and fled, the growling creature pursuing her through the labyrinthine hallways of Blackwood Manor. The house seemed to come alive, the floorboards groaning under unseen weight, the walls whispering unintelligible threats. She found herself in the grand ballroom, its once polished floor now covered in dust and debris. Moonlight streamed through the grimy arched windows, casting long, distorted shadows that danced with the unseen presence that stalked her. Cornered, Elara clutched the wooden box to her chest like a shield. The growling grew closer, and the red eyes pierced the darkness, drawing nearer. She could feel the creature's malevolent presence, a wave of icy dread that threatened to consume her. Just as the shadowy figure lunged, its clawed hand reaching for her, Elara cried out, a desperate, primal scream that echoed through the silent house. And then, something extraordinary happened. A beam of pure white light erupted from the wooden box in her hands, so intense it momentarily blinded her. The growling stopped. The red eyes vanished. The oppressive darkness receded, replaced by a soft, ethereal glow emanating from the box. When Elara could see again, the shadowy figure was gone. The cold, malevolent presence had vanished. The air felt clean, lighter. The only sound was her own ragged breathing and the gentle hum emanating from the wooden box. Trembling, she opened the box again. The wooden doll was still there, but it no longer seemed menacing. Its staring eyes now held a strange kind of serenity, and nestled beside it, shimmering with an inner light, was a small, intricately carved silver locket she hadn't seen before. Confused and shaken, Elara clutched the locket. It felt warm to the touch, radiating a sense of peace and protection. She didn't understand what had happened, but she knew one thing. Something within this house had been malevolent, and something else, something powerful and good, had intervened. As dawn began to paint the sky with hues of pale gold and rose, Elara fled Blackwood Manor, the wooden box clutched tightly in her hands. She didn't look back, the image of the glowing locket seared into her memory. Back in the relative safety of Oakhaven, Elara researched the history of Blackwood Manor. She discovered a tragic tale of a young girl, Eliza Blackwood, who had died within its walls centuries ago under mysterious circumstances. There were rumors of a dark ritual, a desperate attempt to save her life that had gone horribly wrong, leaving a lingering darkness within the house. The wooden doll, she learned, was Eliza's favorite toy. And the silver locket? There was no mention of it in any of the historical records. Days turned into weeks. Elara couldn't shake the feeling that she had stumbled upon something ancient and powerful within Blackwood Manor. The locket, which she now wore constantly, seemed to ward off any feelings of fear or unease. She felt a strange connection to it, a sense of being protected. One evening, as she was examining the locket, she noticed a tiny inscription on its back, almost invisible to the naked eye. Carefully, she cleaned it and, using a magnifying glass, deciphered the faded letters. Hope remains. A shiver ran down her spine. What did it mean? Hope for whom? For what? Driven by an insatiable need to understand, Elara decided to return to Oakhaven. She felt a pull, a sense that her encounter at Blackwood Manor wasn't over. There were still secrets hidden within those whispering walls, secrets that needed to be brought to light. As she stood once more before the imposing gates of Blackwood Manor, a sense of trepidation mixed with a strange sense of purpose filled her. The house no longer felt as menacing as it had before. There was a stillness in the air, a sense of waiting. Elara knew, with a certainty that resonated deep within her soul, that the miracle she had witnessed was not the end of the story. It was just the beginning, and she was about to uncover the truth behind the darkness and the light that dwelled within Blackwood Manor. The melody hung in the air, fragile and ethereal, a stark contrast to the oppressive silence Elara remembered. It tugged at something deep within her, a half-forgotten memory stirring in the recesses of her mind. The lullaby, it was undeniably the same one her grandmother had sung. But how could it be emanating from Blackwood Manor, a place steeped in tragedy and shadowed by a malevolent presence? Hesitantly, Elara pushed open the creaking gates and walked up the long driveway. The house seemed different this time, less menacing, almost expectant. The wind still whispered through the trees, but now it sounded less like mournful sighs and more like hushed secrets waiting to be revealed. As she reached the front door, it stood slightly ajar, as if inviting her in. The melody drifted louder now, clearer, tinged with a delicate sadness. Elara stepped inside, her senses on high alert. The familiar scent of dust and decay was still present, but there was also a faint floral fragrance in the air, like dried lavender. The entrance hall was bathed in an eerie stillness. The shadows seemed less menacing, the air less heavy. Following the sound of the lullaby, Elara moved through the house, her footsteps barely disturbing the silence. The melody seemed to be coming from the grand ballroom. As she reached the ballroom doors, she paused, a knot of apprehension tightening in her stomach. She pushed the doors open slowly. The sight that greeted her stole her breath. The ballroom was no longer the dusty, decaying space she remembered. It was bathed in a soft, golden light that streamed through the now clean, arched windows. The floor gleamed as if recently polished. The heavy drapes had been drawn back, revealing the manicured gardens outside. And in the center of the room, bathed in the ethereal light, stood a young girl with long, dark hair, humming the lullaby as she gently rocked a small, antique cradle. Elara could only stare, her mind reeling. This couldn't be real. Was she dreaming? Had the house somehow changed? The girl turned, her wide, dark eyes meeting Elara's. There was a profound sadness in her gaze, but also a hint of gentle curiosity. She looked to be no older than 10. "Hello," she said, her voice soft as a whisper, carrying the echo of the lullaby. Who are you?" Elara managed to stammer, her voice barely above a whisper. "My name is Eliza," the girl replied, her gaze returning to the cradle. "And you are?" "Elara." A flicker of recognition crossed Eliza's face. "Elara, the one who found my box." Elara clutched the wooden box which she had brought with her, a sense of understanding beginning to dawn. "You're Eliza Blackwood?" Eliza nodded slowly. "I have been waiting." "Waiting for what?" "For someone to remember," Eliza said, her voice tinged with a deep longing. "For someone to hear my lullaby." Elara felt a shiver run down her spine. "But the darkness I felt here before the creature." Eliza's expression clouded over. "That was a part of the sadness. The ritual, it didn't work as they hoped. It bound me here, but it also twisted something. Fear fed it. Despair strengthened it. The silver locket," Elara began, reaching for the pendant she wore. Eliza's eyes widened. "You have it? The locket of hope?" "Hope remains," Elara murmured, recalling the inscription. "What does it mean?" "It was my mother's," Eliza explained, her voice filled with a fragile tenderness. "She believed that even in the darkest of times, hope could bloom. She gave it to me before everything changed." "The ritual, what was it for?" Elara asked gently. "I was very sick," Eliza whispered. "They tried to save me with old ways, with things they didn't understand. It kept me here, but not as I was." Elara understood then. The malevolent presence, the shadows, the growling. It was a manifestation of Eliza's trapped and tormented spirit, twisted by the failed ritual and the lingering despair within the house. But the lullaby, the locket, they were anchors to her humanity, remnants of the love and hope that still resided within her. "Why the lullaby?" Elara asked. Why did it feel so familiar? Eliza looked at her intently. "Your grandmother, she used to visit this house long ago. She was a kind woman. She felt the sadness here. Sometimes she would sit in the gardens and hum this lullaby. It was my favorite." A wave of emotion washed over Elara. Her grandmother had never spoken of Blackwood Manor. This connection, across generations, felt both surreal and deeply significant. The light from the box. Elara continued. "What was that?" "It was the release of the fear," Eliza said softly. "Your fear, when you were threatened, it triggered something within the locket, a protective energy. It pushed back the darkness." Elara looked at the wooden doll in the box. Its once staring eyes now seemed peaceful, almost serene. "What do you need, Eliza?" Elara asked, her voice filled with compassion. "How can you find peace?" Eliza looked at the cradle, then back at Elara, her eyes filled with a profound longing. "I need to be remembered, truly remembered. Not as a ghost, not as a source of fear, but as a child who was loved. And I need someone to let go of the hope that binds me here." Elara frowned, confused. "Let go of hope? My mother's hope. It keeps a part of me tethered to this place, a belief that I can still be saved, still be healed within these walls. But this house, it is a cage now. The true hope is to find peace, to move on." Elara understood. The locket, meant as a symbol of resilience, had inadvertently become a chain. Eliza needed someone to acknowledge the tragedy, to honor her memory, and to release the lingering hope that kept her spirit bound to Blackwood Manor. "How can I do that?" Elara asked. Eliza looked towards a dusty portrait hanging on the wall, a portrait of a beautiful woman with kind eyes. "Tell my story. Remember my mother's love. And then let her hope go." Elara spent the next few hours with Eliza, listening to her stories of childhood, her dreams, her fears. She learned about the joy she found in the gardens, the comfort of her mother's lullabies, and the fear that had consumed her in her final days. Eliza was not a monster. She was a child caught in a tragic web of love and loss. As the sun began to set, casting long shadows across the ballroom floor once more, Eliza's form began to flicker, becoming translucent. "It is time," she whispered, her voice fading. "Thank you, Elara, for remembering." Elara reached out, a sense of profound sadness washing over her. She wanted to hold Eliza, to offer comfort, but her hand passed right through the spectral form. "I will tell your story, Eliza," Elara promised, tears welling in her eyes. "You will be remembered." Eliza smiled, a faint, ethereal glow surrounding her. "Then hope can finally set me free." Elara looked at the portrait of Eliza's mother. With a deep breath, she spoke aloud, her voice filled with emotion. "Your love for Eliza was beautiful. Your hope was strong. But now, it is time for her to find peace. It is time to let her go." As the words left her lips, the silver locket in her hand pulsed with a warm light. The ethereal glow surrounding Eliza intensified, and then, slowly, she began to fade, the sound of her gentle humming growing fainter until it was gone. The ballroom was silent once more, the golden light dimming as twilight deepened. But the oppressive atmosphere was gone, replaced by a sense of quiet peace. The air felt clean, the shadows no longer menacing. Elara felt a profound sense of closure. Eliza's tormented spirit had finally found rest. The darkness that had clung to Blackwood Manor for so long had lifted. She picked up the wooden box, the doll now seeming like a simple, cherished toy. She closed the lid gently. The silver locket in her hand felt lighter, its warmth now a comforting presence rather than a binding force. As Elara turned to leave the ballroom, she noticed something new on the wall beside Eliza's mother's portrait. It was a small, freshly bloomed white rose, its petals delicate and pure, a single drop of dew clinging to its velvety surface. There were no rose bushes anywhere inside the manor. A sense of wonder filled Elara. It was a sign, she knew, a final message. Hope remained not as a chain to the past, but as a promise of peace and new beginnings. Elara left Blackwood Manor as the moon cast its silvery glow over the hill. The house stood silent, its windows dark, but it no longer felt like a skeletal finger pointing at the sky. It felt like a place where a tragedy had been resolved, where a spirit had found its way home. She knew her story wasn't over. She had a promise to keep. She would share Eliza's story not as a ghost tale, but as a testament to a mother's love, a child's lost innocence, and the power of remembrance to finally set a spirit free. And perhaps, in sharing that story, she would also share the miracle she had witnessed, the lifting of darkness and the quiet bloom of hope in a place that had known only sorrow for centuries. The drawing sent a chill deeper than any Blackwood Manor draft down Elara's spine. Her grandmother, whom she remembered as a pragmatic woman with a quiet strength, depicted in such a tender scene with a girl who should have been a centuries-old ghost. The date on the parchment was undeniably recent. It defied logic, history, everything Elara thought she knew. She stared at the drawing, her mind racing. Could there have been another Eliza Blackwood? A descendant? But the familiarity in the girl's spectral eyes, the way she had spoken of Elara's grandmother, it all pointed to the same lost child. Driven by this unsettling discovery, Elara delved deeper into the Blackwood family history. She scoured local archives, old parish records, and dusty genealogical charts. She found no mention of another Eliza Blackwood in the past 2 centuries. The original Eliza's tragic tale was a singular, well-documented event. The more Elara researched, the more the mystery deepened. There were whispers in the local folklore, tales of the manor being a place where the veil between worlds was thin, where time itself could sometimes become fluid. Could her grandmother have somehow encountered Eliza's spirit? Elara remembered snippets of her childhood, vague recollections of her grandmother taking solitary trips to the countryside, sometimes returning with a melancholic air she couldn't explain. Could Oakhaven and Blackwood Manor have been the destination of those journeys? Determined to find answers, Elara sought out the oldest residents of Oakhaven, those whose memories stretched back through the generations. She showed them the drawing. Most shook their heads, recognizing the manor in the background, but not the two figures. Then she met old Mrs. Gable, a woman whose eyes held the wisdom of a century. Mrs. Gable peered at the drawing through thick spectacles, her wrinkled brow furrowed in thought. "The manor? Yes, I know it well," she rasped, her voice like rustling leaves. "And the girl, there was always a story. A sad one. But the woman—" She paused, her gaze distant. "She looks familiar, like someone I saw many years ago. A visitor. Always alone. Always humming a soft tune. The same lullaby?" Elara asked eagerly. Mrs. Gable nodded slowly. "It could be. It was a haunting melody. She would sit by the old oak tree near the manor gates. People said she was grieving. Did she ever speak to anyone? Rarely. She seemed lost in her own world. But I remember once, just once, I saw her leave a small posy of white roses at the gates." Elara's heart skipped a beat. The white rose in the ballroom. It couldn't be a coincidence. Driven by this new lead, Elara returned to Blackwood Manor. She felt a different kind of energy within its walls now, not one of malevolence, but of lingering sorrow and a fragile sense of peace. She went back to the ballroom, the spot where Eliza had faded away. The white rose was still there, its petals unfurling in the soft light. She looked at Eliza's mother's portrait, her gaze lingering on the woman's kind eyes. There was a profound sadness in her expression, but also an undeniable strength. Elara spent hours in the ballroom, trying to understand the connection between her grandmother Eliza and the enduring presence within the manor. She touched the cool surface of the portrait, a sense of empathy washing over her for the mother who had lost her child and whose hope had inadvertently kept her spirit bound. Suddenly, her fingers brushed against something loose behind the portrait. Carefully, she pulled it away from the wall. Behind it was a small, hidden compartment, identical to the one in the wooden box. Inside, nestled on faded velvet, was a letter. Her heart pounding, Elara carefully unfolded the brittle paper. The handwriting was elegant and flowing, the ink faded with time. It was a letter written by Eliza's mother. The letter spoke of her desperate love for Eliza, her grief at her failing health, and her unwavering hope for a miracle. It detailed the rituals they had attempted, fueled by ancient folklore and a desperate desire to save her child. But it also revealed a secret, a connection to a woman who had visited the manor years after Eliza's passing, a woman who seemed to understand their sorrow. The letter referred to this woman only as a kind soul, bearing a familiar melody. It spoke of shared grief, of quiet conversations in the gardens, and of a bond formed through unspoken understanding. It mentioned the woman leaving white roses as a symbol of remembrance and hope. As Elara read on, her breath caught in her throat. The letter revealed that Eliza's mother, in her desperation, had performed one final, secret ritual, one that involved binding a part of her own hope to Eliza's spirit, believing it would keep her daughter close until a true miracle could occur. The silver locket, the letter explained, was a vessel for this enduring hope. And then came the revelation that made Elara's blood run cold. The letter mentioned the kind visitor by name. Eleanor. She reminds me so much of the daughter I might have had Eliza lived. Eleanor. Her grandmother. The pieces began to fall into place, forming a tapestry woven across time and loss. Her grandmother, perhaps drawn to the manor by a sensitivity to its lingering sorrow, had somehow connected with the grieving mother. The shared lullaby, a melody of comfort and love, had formed a bridge between them. But how could her grandmother have interacted with Eliza's mother so long after her death? Unless Eliza's mother's spirit was also tethered to the manor, her hope a powerful, enduring force. Elara realized then that the true miracle wasn't just Eliza finding peace, but the enduring power of love and connection that transcended time and death. Her grandmother, in her quiet way, had played a part in this long-awaited resolution. Suddenly, Elara remembered something her grandmother had once told her, a cryptic remark she hadn't understood at the time. Sometimes, the echoes of the past need a gentle hand to guide them to silence. A wave of understanding washed over Elara. Her grandmother hadn't just visited Blackwood Manor. She had felt its sorrow, connected with its lingering spirits, and perhaps, unknowingly, prepared the way for Eliza's eventual release. Elara returned to the ballroom, the letter clutched in her hand. She looked at the portrait of Eliza's mother, her heart filled with a newfound respect and understanding. "Eleanor understood your grief," she whispered. She carried your sorrow with you, in her own way. As she spoke, the white rose on the floor seemed to glow faintly. A gentle breeze stirred the dust motes in the air, and for a fleeting moment, Elara felt a presence beside her, a sense of gratitude and peace. She knew what she had to do. The final act of releasing Eliza meant also releasing the lingering hope of her mother, a hope that had been carried across generations. Elara closed her eyes, focusing on the image of the white rose, on the memory of Eliza's fading smile, and on the love that had bound mother and daughter. With a deep breath, she spoke aloud, her voice filled with conviction. Your love was a powerful force. Your hope sustained Eliza for a long time. But now both of you deserve peace. It is time to let go, completely. As the words echoed through the silent ballroom, the silver locket in Elara's hand grew warm, then pulsed with a soft golden light. When the light faded, the locket felt different, lighter, its protective energy now gentle and serene. A sense of finality settled over the manor. The air felt still, the shadows quiet. The echoes of the past had finally found their silence. Elara knew her viral story wouldn't just be about a haunted house. It would be about the enduring power of love, the unexpected connections that span generations, and the miracle of finding peace in the most sorrowful of places. It was a story that defied easy explanation, a story that whispered of hope blooming in the ruins of despair. She left Blackwood Manor one last time, the wooden box tucked safely away. As she looked back at the house on the hill, it no longer seemed skeletal or menacing. It stood bathed in the soft moonlight, silent and still, a place where a long, tragic story had finally reached its gentle conclusion. The miracle wasn't a sudden, dramatic event, but a slow, unfolding process of remembrance, connection, and release, guided by a lullaby, a locket, and the enduring power of love that transcended even the boundaries of time itself. And Elara, the curious photographer drawn to the darkness, had become the unexpected catalyst for a long-awaited peace.